I just I mentioned to the screener that this morning I was watching MSNBC, and an Al Jazeera English reporter, Shahid Ratansi, was talking about climate change and how it affected the situation in Texas. And when he got to talking about the money that was made by the oil company, the denial of the oil companies, and then also that Texas politicians would be held responsible, they cut them off. And I know we talk about this a lot, about the corporate media not covering climate change, but I've got living proof on tape that they did it. We never saw anything else of Shahid and the rest of the reporting. They went to other rescues and other, things that would be, other shiny objects, if you will. And I just wondered about, is there anything anybody can do other than just not watch MSNBC, but just the hypocrisy of not covering this in the light that it should be?
Sure, Gary. Well, first of all, I think what we've learned is, the oil industry has known about this for a long time and selectively chose to do nothing. That information's starting to get out more. But, I think any of these Texas Republicans who haven't voted for flood relief for other areas, who still deny climate change as this happens to their own communities and their own state, I think the flood insurance debate that we have coming up also very likely in September, how can you not argue that we're having major climate changes and that they've got to point to something that's doing that? I'm hopeful that, again, people are way ahead of where elected officials are. Elected officials are still kowtowing to the oil and other industries that don't want to admit there's climate change. But we're winning because people understand what's happening, and we just have to replace the people who won't change their ways.
Yeah, seems like a pretty straightforward process. Congressman, we just have 30 seconds till we hit the break. What's your best advice for people who want to change that situation?
Well, I think, whatever group you think is doing the best job on those issues, I always argue double down with those groups right now. They can magnify your voice, call your representatives, make sure they know where you stand. People are doing that more than ever. But then work with those groups that you believe in on those issues you care about and let them magnify your voice. We're winning on all of these fronts if we keep unified.
Yeah. And I don't even think it's a big if. I think people are really coming together right now.
Is it possible we could, we all get a Social Security number. Could we all get a voting number so then there isn't a problem with the names, duplicating, and maybe that would alleviate that problem?
Well, and Deborah, that is part of what we have a bill right now to say if you're going to purge someone, you have to have their Social Security number to prove that they're not that the two people are the same number. Because what they're doing is taking Jose Rodriguez in Florida and Jose Rodriguez in Oklahoma and just purging them because there's two Jose Rodriguez, which is still a fairly common name and not enough to differentiate. Therefore, we're saying you need a middle name, you need a Social Security number. But I think it does come to this automatic voter registration issue. How can we make sure that it's not a burden to become to be able to do your civic duty, which is to vote? And I think we should have all suggestions on the table, Deborah. And you're right, we all get a Social Security number. I know that some people. I think we need to look at all options to figure out how we can ensure that that is a sacred right, in addition to putting it as part of our Constitution, which Keith Ellison from your area and I are trying to do.
Kevin in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you for taking my call, Congressman Pocan. I am concerned about the South Texas nuclear plant. Not only did this hurricane visit every one of our major refineries in Houston, Beaumont, Port Arthur, and Lake Charles, but there are 3 nuclear plants in its path, and with a floodgates forecasting a 45-foot crest in Bay City and a 41-foot retaining wall around the South Texas plant, I'm a little concerned, especially with Rick Perry in charge. Oof.
Yeah. That's Rick Perry alone in charge of anything should make people worry. But your point is well taken. And again, it goes back to this whole debate around climate change. People who want to ignore the science because there's some special interests that want them to ignore the science, and yet that's a real life ramification. If we have problems with power, with nuclear plants, with just about anything, that's affecting real people. Real people will die, and you can't just continue to ignore it because the oil industry is going to keep practicing in the exact same way. So I think it kind of comes back to that original fight. I think most people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, understand what climate change is. We have to just force that upon those who are our so-called leaders.
Dave in Canton, Ohio, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan. Dave, listening on Sirius XM?
Hello.
Hey, Dave, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call. I'm concerned about President Trump's pardon activities. Is there any way that the Senate or the Congress can pass a bill that limits his powers to pardon?
You know, I'll tell you, I think we may have to, with this president, you have to look at everything differently because he's operating so differently. I mean, I think part of the pardon that happened for the sheriff in Arizona was based on just the president thinking that some of his base are outright racist and he's doing it for them and, quite honestly, for himself. But I think a part of it was a signal to all the people that are being called in on the investigations on Russia that, hey, look, I'll have your backs early and often. You don't even have to ask for it because they're claiming sheriff didn't even ask for it and all of a sudden got the pardon. I think there's more of a message that came out of that, not just to keep his race baiting that he's been doing over the last several weeks, which has been just awful, but also to send a message that, you know, keep quiet, and if something happens to you, I can take care of you. I've got the power of pardon. I think he enjoys king-like powers as a president.
Yeah. Well, he's always been a CEO, which is functionally a king. I mean,
right.
Corporations are essentially feudal institutions, so maybe he just thinks that's how it's supposed to be. Matt in Norfolk, Virginia, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Congressman Pocan, it's an honor to speak with you today. My question is about the budget. I don't know how the budget rules work, but if he threatens to veto your budget bill if it doesn't include the wall, do you guys have the power to overrule his veto? And if so, is there any sort of plan or steps being made to do so?
Well, I think we're probably a little ahead of ourselves because, first of all, I think many of the Republicans support what he's doing on the wall. There are some remarkably on border districts who know it's a bad idea that may not support that. But, you know, if he would veto it, yes, we would have the ability to override. But I think that is many steps yet ahead. And I personally think often when the president says something, it's bravado. It's when he doesn't say it, you got to watch out. Like when he did the initial ban on people who are transgender serving in the military. We didn't have advance notice. It just happened in a tweet. I think that's the problem. He often puts these ideas out. He does them in rally settings. He does it for the applause from his adoring fans to cover his narcissism. But I don't know if he'll actually live up to it, one. But more importantly, I think the Republicans likely will keep funding in for the wall because most of them support